So I'd like to start by talking about a mystery that I encountered at the age of 17. And at 17, I was a passionate practitioner of theater. I lived in the suburbs, and I joined this theater company downtown. It was called the Garrett Theater, and like you walked up 2 flights of stairs, and they were doing crazy things, and I loved every bit of it. And in my research, I came across a treatise from ancient Japanese theater. There's a form of Japanese theater called no theater that was developed in the 1300s and still goes today in exactly, everything is set, everything is formalized. And so I read this treatise, which was amazing, and found that a no play was coming to Montreal, which was a 5-minute bus ride. So at 17, I bought a ticket, took this bus to Montreal, and saw this play, which shook me to my core. I was in tears at the power of it, and I had no idea, no inkling how it had had that effect on me. And I could parse theater. I could pull it to pieces and tell you why it worked and why it didn't. And this was like baffling. I had no idea. So that is actually one of the main things that prompted me to go to England and buy a bike and head off for Japan. I didn't have any money, but the mind of an 18-year-old, I was 18 when I did that, the mind of the 18-year-old is a wonderful thing because it seemed not unreasonable, that if I got a bike and I aimed in the right direction and kept pedaling and didn't stop pedaling, that I would get there. And in fact, I did, with a few oceans to navigate along the way. And there I watched no theater. Every single chance I had. And that's where I encountered the Japanese concept of hara, H-A-R-A. Hara is the Japanese word for belly. But, the differences between the way the Japanese think of belly and the way we think of belly, it's night and day. The belly in the Japanese culture is where you return to encounter your primary truth, your deepest understanding. And for us, the belly is, that area that's kind of prone to indigestion, and maybe it's not in shape the way we'd like it. It is a very different relationship. And that's why I had no way of understanding what I was experiencing in no theater, because I'd never seen, a gesture rise from the body from that place. I'd never seen a head turn and see from that place. And so that initiated, at a very young age, a journey to come to terms with that and find my own way into it. It turns out, that region of intelligence isn't exclusive by any means to the Japanese. You probably well know it turns up in Chinese. There are the 3 dantians, and the lower dantian is the belly. And those 3 dantians are indeed the belly, the heart, and the head. It turns up in the Incan culture. It turns up in the Philippines. It turns up in the Mayan culture. In fact, the Mayan culture, they have this beautiful vision of what a human being is. That a human has 2 skulls. There's the cranial skull, and there's the pelvic bowl. And our life courses between them. And that's why in the Mayan iconography, there are those snakes with the 2 heads. That's this. And I love, for myself, feeling the pelvic bowl as a skull. And this is a skull, and my life in balance between them. And of course, that balance in our culture is, we're head-based. We just live in our heads. There's a great if you go to Aboriginal cultures, you find the same thing. There's a great story. The Buddhist philosopher D.T. Suzuki tells a story about an American anthropologist went to this Aboriginal tribe, and he was, talking with them. And he learned, they found out from him that Americans think with their heads. And this was the craziest thing they'd ever heard. And they expressed their bafflement at this. And the anthropologist said, well, where do you think? With our abdomens, of course. And you might wonder, thinking with your abdomen, how is how is that possible? And there's kind of an interesting tale to be told there. There's an anatomist, Byron Robinson. In 1909, he published a book called The Abdominal and Pelvic Brain. And it was a book, it's gorgeous anatomical drawings that detailed a brain in the belly. Our culture has no place for a brain in the belly. In our understanding of what it means to be human, there's nowhere to put that. And so it was forgotten. So Johannes Langley in the 1920s independently rediscovered the brain in the belly. He wrote a book that became the classic on the autonomic nervous system. And he detailed 3 parts of it: the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic, and the enteric nervous system. The enteric nervous system is, again, the brain in the belly. It was forgotten. I mean, it shows you our resistance to this concept, because here's a book that we consider the classic book on the autonomic nervous system, and this whole section of it is just neglected in much the way we tend to neglect that intelligence within our bodies. So a guy, Michael Gershon, was doing research on the gut and discovered serotonin. Serotonin, this is in the 1960s now. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. What's it doing in the gut? And he looked into it, and he realized there is a brain in the belly. So he would present at conferences saying, here's my research, there's a brain in the belly. And they sort of booed him down. They had objections. He came back and answered their objections. It took him about 15 years before finally the neuroscientific community capitulated and said, okay, you're right, there's a brain in the belly. So that was in the early 80s that they actually gave their consent to that. And, you go to someone on the street and you say, how many brains do you have? And yeah, exactly. It's an axiomatic question. Of course we have one brain. In fact, we have 3 brains. There's the brain in the belly. Anatomically, it has a number of really interesting features. Just to make this clear, it's not a subset of the brain in the head. It's independent of it. The vagus nerve connects them, and you can be brain dead, as we call it, and the brain in the belly will continue to work. And it takes care of all of our digestion, so that the cranial brain doesn't have to devote itself to that. Now, it's a brain that remembers, it makes decisions, it thinks, it assesses, it does all these things by itself, but it's not like a lump, the way the brain and the cranium is. It's this network of neural tissue that interlaces the entire gastrointestinal tract. So you can't, put your finger to it. You can't point to it and say, well, here it is, because it's in relationship with everything, which I find kind of interesting, because the nature of the intelligence of that brain in the belly is to come into felt relationship. So, it's like this axis with 2 poles. And they are complementary, and they need each other. And we've separated this pole from this lower pole. So to give you a sense of their differences, the brain and the head is where we can consciously think. And it gains perspective. That's its primary strength. And you think about that, gaining perspective. What does that mean? Well, you can't have perspective on something if you're in the middle of it. You step back and you gain perspective. That brain in the head has the ability of stepping back from all of these sensations in the body, right? And then we feel separate. We feel the world objectifying, and we're sort of at a distance from it, and we can assess it from that distance and analyze it. Analysis means to pull to pieces. That's the etymological root of a word, analysis. And this brain just excels. It loves analysis. But it doesn't know a thing about integration. It goes on in the belief that, well, if you have enough perspectives and you patch them all together, that eventually it'll be a complete whole, and that's not what wholeness is. So the complementary pole, this brain and the belly, comes into felt relationship. It has a genius for integration. Its strength is feeling wholeness. So when you drop your attention and come to rest in that brain and the belly, you suddenly feel the world as a whole. It's a very, very different quality. Now, that language I use, if you drop your attention and come to rest in the brain and the belly, we are so stuck in our heads that when we try to reconcile the brain and the head with the brain and the belly, our efforts more deeply entrench us in the division. It's a very strange thing. So we strive for embodiment, and we listen to the body, and we commune with it, and we feel, that's now I'm embodied. I can hear my body. Well, think about the metaphor. Listening to the body. It's like your body's in the room next door, and here you are putting your ear to the wall, separating you from it, and thinking you've joined it, right? So that's our the very division that we're seeking to overcome is one that we've so habituated to that we're more deeply entrenching it. So that reconciliation with the brain in the belly is a very different one. And just to give you a note of hope, I'm not going to stand up here and talk for 3 hours. We will do practices, and I so look forward to exploring that with you. But I'd really like to kind of etch out a context for you to give you the courage to go spelunking into the body. This quality of wholeness. My new book actually looks at wholeness. The premise of my new book is that we are born with the ability to sense wholeness, and our culture has systematically desensitized. It's undone that ability, that sense, and I take it to be a real sense. And it's, you look at the senses we validate in our culture, and they're all they're all senses that help reinforce the idea that we are separate from the world around us. What do I mean by that? It's like we we think the five senses are well, that's how we are. I mean, that's a given. That's what a human being has, is five senses. And you go to other cultures, and they have a completely different sensorium. They don't have five senses. They don't even. There's a culture in Africa that I've done a lot of work on, the Anglo-Ewe culture. They don't even have senses as we understand them. So how do our senses establish this separation, this division of us, reinforce this boundary between us and the world? You think of every sense, it's based on a model whereby a stimulus from outside crosses the boundary of the self, registers on a receptor, and is sent to the brain for interpretation. So every sense we validate has to have that implicit boundary whereby we're informed about what is outside us. So that the whole realm of our senses in neuroscientific terms it's called exteroceptors. Senses that tell us about the outside world. And for example, balance is not considered a sense. Balance isn't a sense. Now, we talk about a sense of balance. We have an organ devoted to this sense. But balance doesn't substantiate the idea of a boundary. It doesn't separate us from the world. Balance is a felt relationship. And it's such a delicate sense. You feel your balance and you go like that this far over to one side. And you feel that, right? So your center is in relationship with the center of the earth in such a delicate, subtle sensibility. But it's not a sense in our culture. The Anglo-Ewe, there are exteroceptors and proprioception, which tells you where the body is in space, and interoception, which tells you everything that is going on within the body. Interoception would include your digestion. It would include your emotions, your muscles, your breath, all of that. Now, here's an interesting thing. The Anglo-Ewe, that realm is central to their understanding of the senses. They have a word for it, sesilalame. Sesa is flesh. And sesilalame means feel at flesh inside. Feel at flesh inside. So in the Anglo-Ewe culture, every sense is felt inside. They hear the world. They feel the sounds of the world from within their body. They see the sights of the world from within their body. And they do have, there's a word they use that means, for example, to hear with the ear. So, you can just hear with the ear, but that's not real hearing. Real hearing is what happens within the body. And until, so they've got every sense felt within this realm that we call interoception. The English language doesn't even have a word for that realm. I mean, that's us. That's our flesh. That's who we are, is what is felt through the flesh. I mean, we have the word interoception, and as I'm typing that into my computer, my word program tells me that's not a word. I mean, that's how common interoception is. And the English language, I think, arguably has more words than any other language. Just a baffling number of words. And yet, in all that, there is no word for what we feel in the realm of the flesh. So there's this cultural neglect that touches us all. We grow up as kids and we take in our culture's story of what it means to be human. And our culture tells that story over and over and over in our language, our buildings, our education system. I mean, you think of the education system, and you could, stand back and objectively say that the underlying purpose of the education system is to disconnect kids from their bodies and put them in their heads. Seriously, you take this, 5-year-old, this 6-year-old, curious and loves running and finding out about the world, and you say, no, sit still, sit at this desk. Suppress the energy. If you don't suppress that energy, you're going to get in trouble. And now fill your head with this information. And as you're doing it, pay attention to the head of the class. Right? So we not only grow into this story, we then reinforce this story. So every hierarchy is led by the head. There's the head of an organization, right? And you think of a CEO, Chief Executive Officer. Chief comes from a Latin word that means head. You think of Washington, the capital of the country. Capital, Latin word that means head. You think of a captain of a football team, which is so physical, right? Captain comes from a Latin word meaning head. Right? And then you get into your car and you drive down the street and it feels, I don't know, just so kind of familiar and pleasant. And there you are in a machine that's crafted to look like a head. And it's sealed up the way we sit inside our heads, right? And it's got 2 headlights, even though 3 headlights would illuminate the road better, but we need 2 because we've got 2 eyes. Right? And we love the automobile. We love getting inside and closing the doors and turning on our radio, and there we are in our private little realm, driving down the road, looking at the world through a windshield. In such a similar way to the way we sit in our heads and kind of look at the world through our eyes. It's all compounded to invite us to live in the head. And all our language, like she's got a good head on her shoulders, and she's going to get ahead, and can you get your head around this? And even our gestures, give me a moment, I'm thinking about it. Right? Not I'm thinking about it. This is not our culture, right? And yet when we talk about I, we don't say I, right? Because we're talking about our being, I. So that points out this deep, deep division in our culture that I consider the primary wound that we all live with, which is a division between our thinking and our being. We think, and it runs independent of our being, and it's been bred into us. We've been through a system that knows how to pull those entities apart. I mean, in school, literally, you're taught that you can think more clearly if you kind of turn a blind eye to all this noise and stuff it down and just concentrate up here. So we have been taught that we can think more clearly with a small portion of our intelligence than we can with the whole of our intelligence. We've been taught that division is stronger than harmony. And that lives within our neurology. If we really want to grapple with a problem, we go up here. It's such a different thing to bring those poles into unity. As they come into relationship with each other, you feel every thought. There's no such thing as a thought that runs independent of the reality of what the body knows. In this polarity of differences between the brain and the belly and the brain and the head, for myself, I really feel a sort of yin-yang alliance between them, where I feel the brain and the head is analytical, it's calculating, it has perspectives, it loves systematizing, and it feels very male. The brain in the belly comes into felt relationship, and it integrates, and it feels the world, and it recognizes wholeness. And that feels like the female pole of my consciousness. With the brain in the head, and this is what we've been taught, we think our way forward. We decide, we make decisions, and move forward according to that. And that's what we know. And decide, the etymology of the word decide means to cut away. There's a division, right? The brain in the belly is a faculty that enables you to feel your way forward. And there's a substructure in world mythology that helps us understand the relationship between those two poles. It helps us understand the effects of it when they come into felt relationship and the effects when they don't. So, for example, there's a wonderful description in Joseph Campbell's works of the tyrant, because the tyrant is this primary figure in world mythology. And he describes the tyrant as the man of self-achieved independence. The man of self-achieved independence. I don't know about you, but for me, that phrase could double as a description of the American dream. I mean, literally, self-achieved independence. That's what I want. Sign me up. You get enough money, and you get that, finally that mansion with the gate and everyone, you've got people taking care of your every need. That's it. That is the tyrant's dream of freedom. The tyrant's dream of freedom is disconnection. Right? So to disconnect from life sufficiently that it can't get to you and you'll be safe. There is no such thing in the universe as independence. It does not exist. You cannot point me to one example anywhere of independence. It is a fantasy. To yearn for independence is to give your allegiance to a fantasy. And our culture is driven to that. That's the itch. Get enough money that I can disconnect. There's a great researcher, Stephen Cole, whose field is social genomics. And what social genomics is, it looks at how a social milieu changes our genes at an epigenetic level. And it's the social milieu changes our dreams. And one of the things he found, certainly, stress is a sort of precondition for many diseases. But he says it doesn't hold a candle to social isolation. He's done this rigorous research to look at how social isolation so dramatically changes the body that we're susceptible to not just physical illness, but psychological illness. And I think of Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes was this daring aviator. I mean, brilliant guy, and made more money maybe than anyone on the planet in his day. And he ended up in a dark room with just 4 people he trusted, and he would not touch anything without a Kleenex because he was so afraid of the germs. So to me, he sort of represents the natural terminus of this yearning for independence. He could buy whatever, he could buy all the Kleenexes he wanted, right? Endless supply to protect him, to disconnect him, to keep him safe. That's the tyrant's yearning. There's a whole affinity between the tyrant's yearning and the way we live in our bodies. When you retreat from the body and live in the head, you have self-achieved a sort of independence. Right? You've withdrawn from the sensations of your being. And you can sit up there, and when you sit up there, you feel independent of the world around you. Right? Everything is objectified. I mean, we've habituated to that. It's normal for us. But it violates the truth of our world. The truth of our world is there is no such thing as independence. There is only wholeness. There is only interrelationship. Everything depends on everything. Everything leans on everything. And there's a book. Paul Ruel wrote a book called Chance and Chaos. And it's a very scientific book. But in it, he talks about this thought experiment that blows my mind. So here's the thought experiment. You have a magic wand. By shaking that magic wand, you can make the gravitational field of a single electron at the remotest fringe of the universe disappear. Are you with me? Like, it doesn't do a lot, but it makes this gravitational field of this electron disappear. So you shake the magic wand and it's gone. And you have a magnifying glass that lets you track a molecule in this room. So you track the molecule, goes through about 50 collisions, and then it misses a molecule it would have hit had you not used the magic wand. That takes 1 second. After that, every molecular interaction among the molecules in the room will be different from what it would have been. And if you go outside tomorrow, you will feel gusts of wind that would be different. You'll see cloud formations that would be different because the gravitational field of a single electron at the remotest fringe of the universe had disappeared. It's incalculable. But it literally means that when I lift my arm, the universe feels it. When I breathe, the universe feels it. When I think, the universe feels it, because thought is expressed molecularly. The subtlety of the weave that holds us all together is beyond human comprehension. And that's our reality. To desensitize yourself to wholeness is to desensitize yourself to reality. And then you can only live in a fantasy. You can only live in an idea of what is. You miss the fact that we do not think alone, independent in our bodies. We think hand in hand with the world around us. And you can get a sense of that if you imagine a baby born without any senses. The baby can't hear, can't see, can't feel its body, can't feel its breath. Its intelligence would remain dormant. It's through its interactions, through its relationships with the world around it, that it acquires intelligence and is able to think. In our culture, we consistently denigrate the female and consider it inferior. In exactly the same way that we denigrate the belly and the intelligence of the pelvic bowl and don't believe in it and don't trust it. There's this is how I would be speaking to you, right? What matters is from here up. And from here down, I'm more comfortable if it's hidden, because I'm not really sure what's happening down there, and what might you see, right, if it were exposed? And so I stand up here and I'm like a talking head, and God, I'm relieved you can't see like from there down, because I'm so disconnected from it, I'd feel exposed by stepping out. But that's our culture. We've eclipsed the lower half of our body. I refer to the legs as, in our culture, they're prosthetics. They're useful. They get us over to here, and then they get us over to here. But even, you look at our theater, and what matters is like from the waist up, and all this is happening. And the waist down, I don't know, it'll get you to the side table so you can pick up your champagne glass. And in Japanese, in Oriental theater, and especially classical no theater, which I studied, what's important is from the waist down. And there is all this grounded sensitivity and this awareness. That's where the power is. And what's up here is wide open and available to the world. So the world just sort of passes through the body and informs it as that connection with the earth is maintained. That sense that the body is a vehicle is not a new thing. If you go back to 350 BC, Plato wrote a dialogue called Timaeus. And this character, Timaeus, in the dialogue is asked, how did the gods make us? And Timaeus, wise man that he was, replied, well, first they fashioned this divine sphere based on the orbs of the heavens. And then they realized it wouldn't be able to get around. It needed a vehicle. So they grew it a body and limbs and legs so that it could get around. 350 BC, the body is being experienced as a vehicle. And it goes back way further than that. Parmenides is a pre-Socratic philosopher. He set the tone for all of Western philosophy. And if you look at a genealogy of Western philosophy, it traces back, and it arrives at Parmenides. And here's the primary contention of Parmenides. Don't trust the senses. They will deceive you. Only reason can lead you to the truth. Now, where reason led him was to establish, with a solid argument that nothing can move. He could prove to you logically that nothing can move. And if your senses tell you that something's moving, you're being deceived, because he can prove that nothing can move. So, reason can also deceive us. And the senses, since his day, we've mistrusted the body. We don't even think of the body as intelligent. We think of the body as a mechanism, a vehicle, a way of serving the head. In fact, there's a guy, Dick Schwab, who wrote a best-selling book called We Are Our Brains. He's a neurologist. And he writes in the book, yes, the body is useful for three things. It can move the brain around. It can reproduce the brain. And it can feed the brain. That's what the body's for. In my new book, I take him to task somewhat. There's a researcher last September, a guy called John Coates, who sort of overturned that in my eyes. So John Coates is an interesting guy. He was a Wall Street trader, a high-frequency Wall Street trader. High-stress job, you're making decisions like this. And then he left Wall Street and he became a neuroscientist. Logical stuff. And then he came back to Wall Street because this thing was happening in trading where once in a while he'd make a trade and he would know it was going to be good, and it was. And he realized that phenomenon had never been looked at and what was going on. So he did 2 rounds of research. In the first round of research, he said, somehow my body knew. So he got a group of traders and he measured their cortisol levels, and he would give them a questionnaire to assess their sort of cognitive assessment of a trade. So it doesn't take long to find out if a trade was successful or not. So he'd have what the body knows revealed through such things as cortisol levels. Cortisol is one of the main stress hormones. And he'd give them a questionnaire to find out, how did you feel about this trade? Was it a sure bet 1 to 10? So the results came back. The body was in lockstep with the reality of the trade. The trade was risky, the body knew it. The trade was good, the body knew it. The psychological, the cognitive assessment, no correlation. No correlation. It's like sometimes they lined up, but law of averages, they're bound to. It didn't correlate to anything that the researchers could find. So then, round 2 of his research, he said, okay, if the body has that awareness, has that sensitivity to reality, then traders who are more in touch with their bodies should do better. So he got this other test where he outfitted traders with a heart rate monitor that they couldn't see, but he would know their heart rates. And then once in a while he'd text them, what's your heart rate? And they would feel their heart rate and text him back an answer. There are traders who just guessed. They had no idea. And there are traders who can feel their heart rate so clearly. They had that much interoception. So we got these results back and then looked at the previous year's trading. And the traders who were more in touch with their bodies did significantly better than the traders who weren't. Not only that, but the traders who lasted on Wall Street and thrived for 20, 30 years were way more in touch with their bodies, as though the marketplace were selecting for that ability to feel the body. So John Coates speaks about the body as the preconscious. He speaks about it as a parabolic reflector that attunes to the world with a sensitivity that the conscious mind couldn't begin to grasp. There is a field of intelligence there that our culture and we as individuals have turned away from. It's an intelligence that every hunter-gatherer, every Aboriginal culture knows about. There's a great book. When I give teachers trainings, the one book I assign, you have to read this before you turn up for the first session, is called Original Wisdom. And it's a beautiful book by a guy called Robert Wolfe, who had an interesting childhood. He grew up in Suriname just playing with the kids there. And then he was shipped off to Europe and trained in Europe, and then became a sociologist and was stationed in Malaysia. And in Malaysia, he got to know the Sungoi, which is an Aboriginal inland group of, it's a tribe. And he got to know them, and in the process of knowing them, kept being frustrated because they would know things that they had no way of knowing. For example, he'd decide on a Saturday morning, I think I'll go and visit this village, which is a 2-hour drive and a 1.5-hour trek through the jungle. And he gets in his car and he takes off and he's walking towards the village, and there's someone waiting on the path to escort him to the village. Invariably. They knew he was coming. He didn't know he was coming. They knew he was coming. He's walking along the jungle with this guy who's helping him learn, Ahmed. Ahmed says, "Stop." Okay. They stop, and a minute later, a 14-foot snake crossed the path 20 feet in front of them. You couldn't hear it. You couldn't see it. And he looked at Ahmed. He said, "How did you know? How did you figure out?" And he said, No, the snake is in here. He's feeling it. And it's the most extraordinary thing. He took Ahmed to the sea. The Sungoi have no word for ocean. They live inland. They've never seen the ocean. No one in the village had seen the ocean. And Robert Wolfe was going to the ocean. He took Ahmed along. And they woke up the next morning. There's Ahmed standing like 100 yards from the ocean, kind of with his eyes semi-closed, under the shade of a tree, just standing there. Finally, it's time to go back to the village, and they go back, and Ahmed announces when they get to the village, "We'll have a meeting tonight. I have something important to tell you." So everyone gathers. Ahmed begins to describe the ocean, which he hasn't touched. He never went up to its edge. And he talks about how the ocean covers most of the earth. And under the ocean, there are valleys deeper than any that the Sungoi know, and mountains. And there are rivers in the ocean that fish ride for thousands of miles. And he says there are fish bigger than elephants. There are fish that fly on wings. He's describing the ocean, having stood at its surface, at its edge, and felt it, and felt it, and felt it. The parabolic reflector, attuning to the world. And without that, Aboriginal cultures would not survive. They rely on that other way of knowing that John Coates' research has brought to the surface. Just to give you a heads up, I will open the floor to questions. So if there's something you want to ask, make a note of it. I'll be happy to address it if I can. This other intelligence is a part of us, and it's centered in the pelvic bowl. And what journey separated us from it. And that journey, this is not a new thing. I mean, our culture has become increasingly abstract, and abstraction is the realm that the intelligence in the head is enthralled with. And abstraction's great, but unintegrated abstraction is unreality. That's my only contention, right? So, if you go back 10,000 years, the early Neolithic cultures of Europe, even the late Paleolithic. Like the Magdalenian is this late Paleolithic era. They were so attuned to their world that our research tells us they spent 11 to 15 hours a week taking care of their needs, and the rest was leisure time. 11 to 15 hours. And the rest, and you know, they could walk into the forest and the food was there. They could feel it, they attuned to it. And there are anthropologists, there was a survey, you know, if you could live in any era, what would it be? And so many of them said the Magdalenian. That attunement to the world shifted when we discovered the seed, when we discovered agriculture. So the moment you take a seed and you place it in the earth, the world shatters. So suddenly that seed is mine. And suddenly that bit of ground it's in is mine. And an animal comes along and threatens to eat your plant. Suddenly that animal is vermin. Right? And another plant growing up beside yours, suddenly it's a weed. It has to be killed. And that tree that's putting your plant into shade has to be taken down because your plant needs sun. And the whole world schisms into good and bad in a way that never existed prior to that. We domesticated animals. Think about the consequence of that. We own this animal. I mean, prior to that, you know, a tree was a manifestation of the living goddess. And our culture was centered around the mother. The mother was the center of our culture. And now we're taking charge of the world. We're moving into control and ownership. And when our domesticated animal has babies, we own those babies. Sounded interesting. We're like gods to our domesticated animals. You think of it. We're like, we control their breeding. We control their eating. We appoint the hour of their death. And so in the way we stand over animals in that godlike way, suddenly our deity is not the bountiful mother. Suddenly our deity is up in the sky, looking over us in the same way, running our lives, appointing the hour of our death. And it's not a woman, it's a man. Somebody who can take charge like that. Somebody who can control things. And as that shift, as that cultural shift began to happen from a mother-centered to a father-centered culture, this center that rested in the belly began to move. And you can see it. You can see it in the art, where the belly is so prominent. And there's this wonderful anthropologist, Maria Gimbutas, who you know, we put somebody dies and there's a headstone, right? That's what we do. They had a navel stone, right? I mean, you're marking the center rather than the head. And that shift, you can trace it in language. If you go into Homer, into the original Greek, he uses a word over and over, phren, P-H-R-E-N, that survives in English as phrenology, phonetic. There's a phrenograph, which measures the movements of the diaphragm, and there's phrenology that measures the head. These two things were one in ancient Greek. So phren translates into English roughly as diaphragm, but it also translates as mind. And there are translations of Homer. There's Richmond Lattimore is my favorite translator of Homer, and he'll honor that. He'll say, have a character occasionally say, the mind within my breast understands your words. The mind within my breast. And then, by Plato's day, by Timaeus, it's up in the head and the body's a vehicle. So with the Neolithic Revolution, we began to control. Now, control is one of the things that the brain and the head is very, very good at. Control is the opposite of harmony. So we yearn for that grace, that harmony in our lives. But we confuse control and harmony, and we think the way to get to harmony is by getting the right control. They're opposites. Control, you impose a system of ideas on an organism, a living system, and you control it. Harmony is a state in which every part of an organic whole freely answers to every other part. So when I think of harmony, I think of, there are these murmurations of starlings. The most extraordinary. Do look it up on YouTube. You get up to 250,000 starlings taking off into the sky, and they form this cloud that is like an organism. And this cloud condenses and ripples and lofts and settles, and it's the most beautiful thing. It's more delicately orchestrated than any symphony. It's exquisite. To me, that's harmony. No one is in charge of that murmuration of starlings. No one's organizing it. There is no control. There is responsiveness. Every starling is responsive to every other. It's an extraordinary. So, we moved from the harmony of the Magdalenian to the control that we're in now. And, we live our lives and wonder why we feel disconnected and graceless and out of sorts. And we think the solution is to redouble our efforts to make sense of it. And there is this other option of dropping down into that pelvic bowl and coming to rest there and honoring it. And, the research of John Coates shows us the power of that intelligence. What realm is more abstract than a high-frequency trading floor on the stock exchange, right? Even in that realm, the body feels the reality of the moment in a way the head is incapable of. So the tyrant, this embodied intelligence we've habituated to, where we think with our heads in a way that's dissociated from the body, the tyrant is what happens to us when we turn our backs on our own female intelligence. Then the male cuts off from that and goes it alone and takes charge and runs the show, which surely to God he's entitled to do because he's the smart one. And then in mythology, there's the hero. Joseph Campbell describes the hero as the man of self-achieved submission. And that's weird for us, right? Self-achieved. Hero? Hero submits to nothing. But the reality is that the hero so deeply submits to what is. So deeply submits to that pulse of the present that guides him or her. That he will never submit to tyranny or force or coercion. He's affected a deeper submission that lives beyond that. It reminds me, there's this Tibetan book of living and dying, in which there's a story of the Chinese were eliminating Tibetan Buddhism. And they arrived at this one monastery, and they said, "We need to take your abbot in for questioning." And what that means is he's going to be tortured to death. I mean, that's what it means. So they took the abbot and a couple of his monks on horses down, and on the ride down, the abbot burst into song and sang these gorgeous songs on the way down. And they finally arrived at the Chinese camp, and they went to take him off his horse, and he was dead. I find that extraordinary. The hero has this allegiance to what is and lives in wholeness. And that submission, that lovely image of the man proposing to the woman, and he goes down on one knee and offers her the ring, and she stands there and says, "Well, maybe." But that relationship, archetypally, sort of frames the relationship between these two poles of intelligence. It is through submission. The brain and the head acquires its perspectives. Those perspectives are of limited value until they're brought down through the body and brought into contact with that intelligence in the pelvic bowl. Those gifts are offered in humility. And this, if this is the realm of doing up in the head, this is the realm of being in the pelvic bowl. And anything that is kept separate from your being is unintegrated. And we live with unintegrated energies in our being, in our body, and they're like little shadows. They're like little islands of desensitivity. And there's sort of seven different kinds of energies that we tend not to integrate. Emotional energy, we all know about that, how a trauma or an incident or somebody slights you and you hold it in the body. That can go on. We have unintegrated ideas. You know that's a tree. Why would you bother feeling it? You know what it is. And so we're in known relationship with the world, with our unintegrated ideas that circumvent or seem to render unnecessary coming into felt relationship. And that quality of felt relationship, we've given our allegiance to knowing the world objectively. And we believe, there's this current in our culture where we believe knowledge will save us. It drives us and sends us to our Facebook page and Twitter and whatever. Knowledge will save us. And you look at that assumption for a half second and you think, okay, if knowledge were going to save us, then we'd be in much, much better shape now as a species than we were 2,000 years ago when we thought that the Earth revolved around the sun. We didn't know there was a circulatory system. We didn't know anything, relatively. And here we are with all this knowledge, and we've nudged the systems of the planet to the point where they're beginning to unravel. Knowledge is lethal if it's not counterbalanced by self-knowledge. But self-knowledge we've turned into a kind of objective knowledge. Who are you? Oh, well, this is my Facebook page, and these are my favorite movies, and these are my values and my ethics, and that's who I am. It's like a grocery list, right? Self-knowledge and knowledge are opposites. So, objective knowledge is a self-centered understanding of the world. You gain knowledge, you grasp it, you hold on to it, you own it, you possess knowledge, and that gives you a certain orientation to the world around you, and maybe even a certain leverage. But if knowledge is a self-centered understanding of the world, self-knowledge is a world-centered understanding of the self. So what I mean by that is self-knowledge is gifted to you as you come into felt relationship. So there's some kid playing with chalk on the sidewalk, and you come in with the whole of your being. You come into felt relationship with that child, and your being is illuminated in a certain way. The world illuminates who we are as we come into felt relationship. Or you come into felt relationship with that tree, and you actually feel that living being standing there. And again, you're illuminated in a certain way. The more deeply you come into felt relationship with the world around you, the more deeply you discover who you are. We can't illuminate ourselves. It's like holding a flashlight to your face to see what it looks like. It doesn't work that way. You open to the world, and the world gifts you a self-knowledge as you discover yourself there. So that quality of felt relationship is what nourishes our very being. And yet we live in a world of unintegrated ideas. So I was talking about those 7 kinds of energy that tend to be unintegrated. We have unintegrated warnings. As kids, don't do that. You're going to look stupid, right? Keep quiet, right? No one wants to hear you. Whatever it may be, we take in these warnings, and they protect us and guard us all our lives. And they don't realize we're not 6 years old anymore. I mean, they just don't, right? And they're still standing guard, and they kick in to keep us safe. And again, those energies need to be integrated. We have unintegrated muscle patterns. We hold our bodies in ways that dull them to the life of the world around us. We have unintegrated centers of intelligence in the body. The heart is out of relationship with the head. The pelvic bowl is out of relationship with the heart. We have, we've compartmentalized this fluid, unified intelligence within us. And we live in this either-or modality. So, like, I can be sensual and feel the world, and then I'm asked an abstract question, and I abandon that and go up into my head, dividing my thinking from my being, which is the division that's been inculcated in us all. We have difficulty integrating the energy of the present. Right? We witness it, we watch it, we notice it, but that's not integrating it. That's not allowing it to live through your being as the Ango Ive allows the world to be felt and heard and understood in the body. And the last unintegrated sort of energy is the supervisor. We run our bodies. Thinking and being are divided, and we supervise ourselves. When you supervise yourself, you are self-conscious. You are conscious of the self. And it's like what? We're taught self-mastery, that's what we need. And we sort of miss the little detail that if you've mastered the self, you've turned it into a slave, haven't you? It's like, how can there be self-mastery how can you master the self without turning it into like a slave. But because we identify with the master, we identify with the supervisor, running the show, taking charge, calling the shots. And we miss that realm of harmony, which lives through the body and is centered in the pelvic bowl. So the hero submits to what is and finds harmony with the present. All of this, the relationship between that intelligence in the pelvic bowl and the intelligence in the head, come into focus through a modern fable that we're all familiar with. Not a fable, a modern story, modern myth. 1968, Apollo 8 blasts off from the Earth, and for the first time in history, man orbits the moon. And as they come around the edge of the moon, they look out and they see the first Earthrise ever witnessed. And there's that gray, dappled surface of the moon in the foreground, and beyond it, this pastel orb floating in space, hugging to its surface all the known life in the universe. And they took a photograph of that and brought it back to Earth and said, look. And that photograph has been credited with changing our relationship to the Earth. And it's interesting, you look, 68, in the wake of that, Greenpeace started, Earth Day started. There's this activism. And that perspective from outer space brought back home resensitized us. Why does sensitivity matter? We've defined our intelligence in terms that are very flattering to the one doing the definition, right? That the intelligence in the head defines intelligence as the ability to reason in an abstract fashion, which just happens to be its strength. And I say, the ability to reason in an abstract fashion is one little bandwidth, an important bandwidth on the spectrum of intelligence, but it sort of neglects 99% of it. So if I think of intelligence, what is intelligence? First of all, intelligence is sensitivity. I don't care what sensitivity is. It can be a sensitivity to a child's tears. It can be sensitivity to birdsong, to the touch of a breeze, to arithmetic relationship, to legal argument. Any sensitivity. And you couldn't name all the human sensitivities. What would you call Archimedes' sensitivity, standing 100 yards from the ocean and feeling it? It's certainly a form of intelligence. Any sensitivity is a form of intelligence. But the thing about a sensitivity is that a sensitivity is reactive. I mean, if the retina didn't react, we wouldn't see. But that reactivity cannot make the information it's receiving coherent without being grounded. So you ground that sensitivity, and it stabilizes and becomes coherent. So there are people, I'm sure you've heard people accused of being too sensitive, or maybe you've been accused of being too sensitive, and I just don't think there's such a thing. I think what there is a sensitivity to the world that hasn't learned the skill of what it is to be grounded. And that groundedness requires the body. It's in that preconscious parabola that those energies are brought in contact with your being, and they are grounded, and they come into coherence. So in my terms, intelligence is grounded sensitivity. And you think then of that astronaut bringing that perspective back to Earth, and that perspective being reborn as a sensitivity. It makes us able to live more intelligently. Any sensitivity enables us to live more intelligently. And we take it as axiomatic that we are the most intelligent animal on Earth. And I would say, no. I mean, we're the cleverest animal on Earth, but there's a strong argument to be made for being the least intelligent animal on Earth. We've forgotten how to live intelligently. And we think cleverness will get us there. And there is no intelligence without the body. And in fact, neuroscience has looked into how the brain operates. And, the brain imagines itself splendidly independent of the body. And the reality is, everything we know is through the body. We discover the world by moving through it. I know what that water bottle is because I know the weight of it, the touch of it in my hand. My body has known it. I know nothing without the body. I remember this one experiment they did with kittens, and they had one kitten in a little basket, and it was like the basket was hanging from a harness on a pivot, and there was another kitten on the other end who could walk. And the kitten would walk around, and the other kitten would be carried the same length, the same speed, through the room. And then they, kittens spent some time doing that, and then they liberated the kittens from this contraption, and the kitten who had not been able to move had no ability to move, had no intelligence about the world. It's through the body that our intelligence develops. So that astronaut's journey back to Earth, on the scale of human consciousness and our evolution, we started here in the belly, and we blasted off, and we're now in orbit. And we're like an astronaut, going round in orbit, gaining more and more perspectives, more and more perspectives. We're filling up our space capsule with perspectives, and we don't know how to bring those home. We don't know how to integrate them, that they might sensitize us to ourselves and the world around us. And that journey of the astronaut is mirrored in the body. That ability to bring those perspectives down through the body and in contact with that intelligence in the pelvic bowl. And we'll look at that after our break. As I promised, we do have time for questions, if anyone has questions. And you know what we have? We have this microphone. Belinda has a microphone, the likes of which I've never seen, because it's like this foam ball that you can pass around.
Now, where's our guy to turn it off? It's live. All right, so here's the deal. So you talk into the magic box, and then when you're done, you toss it. So, this is the hotel's deal. I've never done this before. So I'm gonna toss it to Albert, and then do you see the next person to toss it to? All right, here you go.
Hello?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm applauding you for being present here with your story. It's amazing and heartwarming. And I had one of your examples that was confusing me. It's about the trade, the stock market traders. In my head, analysis or my uncomfortable feeling in my belly, I'm really worried that if you think that the wisdom of the belly is the carrier of these stock markets destructions of our world and our civilization, and I wonder what would be your opinion about looking at it like this. Is this a belly perception of it, or is it a head perception of it? And maybe you can help me integrate it.
So you're talking about when the stock market goes crazy and there's a crash?
It's in its basic, it's sick.
Yeah. So John Coates, his research looks at when the stock market goes crazy, it's because of what's happening in the body. And you know, economists treat people like they're just brains on sticks. And a lot of his work is saying, no, it's the body. And until we take the body into account, those runaway, crazy bear markets will continue. But the stock market was created by this intelligence. It's not a highly embodied practice. But John Coates' research showed that even in that very, very abstract realm, the body feels the reality. Now, just to be clear, it's not that I could be grounded in my body and walk into the stock market and know what trades were good. I wouldn't have a clue, right? So it's the integration of the two. That's what's necessary. It's not like some touchy-feely thing. It's taking this abstract knowledge and informing your being, sensitizing your being through it, and then the reality is found not through calculation and abstract reasoning.
Right.
The reality is felt through the body. Does that help?
Almost. Because what I mean is that the idea of greed, the idea that money on money has anything to do with the real wisdom of all the cultures.
To the holy ideas, which were from, and that is their guiding principles. And I was like, a stock market trader trading, kind of what you were saying, but that is their whole thing, is that when you are trading from your highest self, you're in concert with the universe, and that you are in concert with what's the highest use for mankind. And that is their guiding principle. And they use the Enneagram and some other tools to fine-tune your highest self. But when I'm hearing you, I'm going, and if you integrate the body into that as well, you probably can get more tuning to your higher mind and to the holy ideas. But she's teaching the apex of this is to get you to be able to operate out of all 9 holy ideas. That you're not just reading the principles or what you think the stock market is telling you. You're trading out of your higher mind. And
Yeah, I just wonder if the higher mind buys oil stocks.
I don't know that I can answer that.
Yeah, but
Because that was my
so-
my question when I started getting into that.
Yeah, so the whole cultural lust, I shouldn't call it lust, the whole cultural inclination to raise your consciousness is something other than wholeness. I'm not saying it, I'm not, taking it, I won't call it lust.
Well, these are called the holy ideas,
Yes.
which is wholeness.
Which is putatively wholeness, and if you're
Right.
leaving the body out of it, the thing about wholeness is wholeness has no boundary.
Right. Wholeness
Excludes nothing. Wholeness includes everything. The breath, the body, the light of the world. So if we chase a really solid idea of wholeness, it's not wholeness.
And holy is derived from wholeness.
Well,
and so when you're in concert with holy and wholeness, those two ideas are together, integrated. So you have to be.
In theory.
Yeah. Well, you have to be in
no,
the body.
but you look at the religious traditions of the world, and every one of them abjures the body in some way or another, right? In the pursuit of the holy, because we've transferred our allegiance to the sky, and we've lost this, and in the process of having lost this, we've despoiled it.
You want me to throw it to Mike?
Oh, nice toss.
So I just want to thank you. This has been the most profound teaching I've ever heard on the Belly Center anywhere. And I've been in this field a long time, and I just want to honor your presentation, the clarity and your embodiment of what you're speaking about. It's just been a joy. And I want more. So I brought up a couple questions. This resonates so much with the Gurdjieff work that I'm involved in, down to, the smallest piece, just gorgeous teaching. And I wondered if you will say something about your own spiritual journey, if that's something you would be comfortable talking about, and also if you happen to know your Enneagram type, so I can categorize you, of course, and then connect with my belly and bring it into wholeness. And we will be at one at that point, which will be a good thing for everyone, right? So anyway, wonder if you could respond.
The second question is easier. No. Now, okay. I've come to understand that the Enneagram is a very sophisticated system of inquiry, and I so look forward to that. But honest to goodness, I went on, I wonder what type, and went online and found a little questionnaire. I couldn't answer the questions. There wasn't the scope for my truth in this online questionnaire. So I need a somewhat subtler give and take than the web provided me.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
Your first question. So when I was cycling to Japan, I actually didn't cycle to Japan. I got as far as India, and Burma wouldn't let me in, China wouldn't let me in, so I had to fly from India to Hong Kong to Osaka, and I cycled to Japan. So there I am, an 18-year-old on my bike in Iraq, wherever. I head off in the morning with this freedom. I smell the world I'm passing through and meet people. On a bike, you're wide open to the world. And I have no idea what's around the next bend. I have no idea where I'll be sleeping that night. And I slept outside the whole way. And the dusk would start to fall, and I would be guided to a place where I could spend the night safely. And I felt that tangibly. I felt that through my exhausted body at the end of the day. And I feel the present so tangibly. And we have this cultural thing that reality is out there and I should connect with it. And my experience of reality is my experience of the world passing through me. And I take in a breath, and I'm taking into my body exhalations of trees that become my cells. I bite into an apple, and the juice of the apple, the flesh of the apple become my flesh and my blood. My capillaries, my eyelashes. And the apple passes through me. And nourishes the apple tree, or did until toilets were invented. But the world is passing through me. And if my reality, and then I feel you sitting there and your energy passes through me. And it's in that coursing of the present through my being, that I feel the wholeness, that I feel the present. And you know, every attribute we assign to the divine, you could also assign to the present. It's omnipresent. It's omniscient. It's aware of everything. It's everywhere. It's all powerful. And I feel in the present. You know, you think of the word consciousness. I was thinking about that word. What's the con about? Right? Con means together. It means with. And so I looked up the etymology. Our word consciousness comes from a Latin root, conscire, that means to be mutually aware. To be mutually aware. And when I come into felt relationship with a water bottle, with a pebble, with a tree, I always feel that as I am knowing that pebble, I am being known. That the world sees itself through my eyes. And the body is a resonator. It's like a bell. And in our culture, in our ways, it's like we stuff the bell with cotton wool, and it loses it's resonance. And the body is ready to ring with the present and being so deeply informed by it. But it's lost its resonance because we've compartmentalized and blocked up, and it's thick. It's consolidated. And there's not room for the world to pass through it. And so my life has been about integrating those cotton balls, dropping them away until there's room within my body for all the world to live. And then the present rings me and calls me, and I follow.
Breathtaking. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's refreshments.
Yes. So 15 minutes, and we'll start again at 11.
Thank you. Got this perfectly placid, still center in the midst of all this movement that feels the harmony of it and liberates to the harmony of it. And I'm not pushing myself. I'm not trying. I'm just releasing into it. And it's the stillness that enables my body to remain whole in that sprint. And, you know, knock on wood, it's been fine. In fact, I love it. So that stillness isn't an arrested stillness, it's a fluid stillness. And my core is that still point, and I feel it move as far down as the perineum, and I feel it rise as high as the tanden. So let's find those 2 points. The perineum is really amongst all those areas we're not allowed to talk about because it's right between the anus and the genitals. And I think the perineum is at the center of the pelvic floor. So that means the perineum is at the center of the ground of your being. And you can find the perineum because it's that little muscle you engage when you stop yourself from peeing. It's like right there. Oh, right, there it is. So that's the perineum. And what I call the tanden, it's a Japanese term. It's this point at the top of the pelvic bowl, maybe a couple of inches below the belly button, right at your center. And it's like the second chakra is in the same place. And my core moves between those. So my core will rise as high as the tanden. And when that happens, I'm in an I-thou relationship with the world. Whatever I see, whatever I come into relationship with, I do that as an equal. And then to drop down and actually come to rest on the perineum, that's a different realm. When my center of awareness is at rest on the perineum, I'm in this realm of non-personal intimacy. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like the world is ravishingly intimate, and I take none of it personally. So let's play with this. If you'd like to give it a shot, we'll get up on your feet. It may be easier again to use some space at the back or at the front, wherever you're comfortable. So we're going to draw figures of 8. But we're going to draw figures of 8 with the tanden by moving our hips. So the first thing to do is to feel that place. It's like just below the belly button, right inside, right at the center of your body. And it will show up for you. It will reveal itself, and just let that happen. And once you feel the tanden, it's like feel it as a point of light. And with that point of light, you can trace out a figure 8 from side to side as though you were drawing it in space. So you're aware of the tanden. As you move your hips, you're actually moving that point of light. I think of it like a sparkler at night. And you do a sparkler at night and it leaves that path. That's how I feel that figure 8. So that core, that tanden, that point of light, is tracing out a figure 8. And then the point of light starts to pick up speed. And the 8 start to get a little smaller. And the point of light gets a little faster, and the 8 gets a little smaller. You're feeling that point of light tracing out this 8, 8, 8, 8 in space. And it's getting really small. It's a really tiny 8. And you just, the pelvic bowl is so fluid, and that little 8 is tracing out 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, and relax. And feel that point of light. You may feel it kind of humming, kind of activated. And then we'll draw out a figure 8 from front to back. And again, you're tracing out the 8 in space. You're feeling it laying down that path like a sparkler at night. And feel that fluidity in the pelvic bowl, and feel that point of light tracing out the 8s, and the point of light starts to pick up speed. And the 8s start to get a little smaller, and you're really feeling yourself trace out those 8s. 8, 8 from front to back, and it starts to pick up speed, and the 8s get a little smaller, picks up speed, and the 8s get smaller, and that point of light is so clearly tracing out these 8s. The 8s get really, really, really small, and really, really fast, and relax. And again, feel the afterimage of that point of light activated. And we're going to go a figure 8 as though you're drawing it in space this way. Up and down. Up, and again, your attention is on that point of light, on tracing you. It's almost as palpable as a finger drawing it on a surface. You feel it leaving that path in space. And the point of light starts to pick up speed. And the 8s start to get a little smaller. And you're feeling that point of light so clearly tracing out these 8s. Tracing out these 8s. It's getting smaller and smaller, and faster and faster, and relax. Again, feel the afterimage of that. Feel it as clearly as you can. And bring your awareness to the perineum. So you've got that activated center and the perineum. And allow that point of light, allow that activated center gently, gently to begin to drop down through the body towards the perineum. And it just, the way a pebble tossed into a pond seeks the bottom, you feel it sliding down towards the perineum. And there's a moment, if you're patient with it and gentle with it, there's a moment where it arrives on the perineum. And check in with the perineum to see, are you really there? Because sometimes you're an inch or so above it, and it makes all the difference. And you just drop down, and then you feel that point of light come to rest on the perineum. And imagine rising up through your body, a hollow shaft, like a tube. And its center runs in front of the spine, but it's big enough it includes the spine at the back. And at the very center, at the bottom of that tube, is that point of light. It rises up through the body, this open corridor, all the way to the top of the head. And up in your head, locate the center of your awareness. And it can show up as a ruby, it can show up as a flower, it can show up as a drop of oil. It doesn't matter. It can just show up as a felt awareness. And you feel that discrete center of your awareness in the head. And you'll find you can shift it inside the head. You can move it gently to one side. It'll slide through the head. You can slide it around to the back of the head. And you'll feel it sliding around. You slide it over to the other side of the head. And then slide it to the very center of that tube. And feel that relationship between the center of your awareness at the top of that tube and that point of light at rest on the perineum. And then allow the center of your awareness to gently begin to descend down through the body. And you feel it sliding inside the body, slowly, smoothly, continuously, dropping down the way a stone tossed into a pond seeks the bottom. And if at some point that center of your awareness seems reluctant to go further, it's like it stalls out, understand that you've encountered a gift. Understand that you've disclosed a little shadow in the body that you might not otherwise have been aware of. What that shadow needs is to be seen, in the same way that an orphan needs to be seen. It needs to be wrapped in your love and your unconditional acceptance. And as you offer those qualities to it, that shadow will begin to dissipate. And you can resume that descent, and you'll feel that center of your awareness dropping, dropping, dropping. It's like the astronaut coming home. And especially down through the pelvic bowl, be ever so patient with it. And be aware of that moment when the center of your awareness merges with that point of light. So the center of your awareness is at rest on the perineum. And be aware that you're at rest in a realm of your consciousness that doesn't require language, doesn't even find language adequate, but it knows wholeness. And submit to that to whatever degree you're comfortable with it. Allow yourself to rest there and submit to the wholeness. And feel the wholeness of this moment in this room now. Without needing to know it, without needing to identify it, it passes through you and you're at rest within it. And be aware as you rest in that place, you can hear the world from that place. You can just receive. You can just receive what is without needing to grasp it or identify it or categorize it. You can just receive the sounds of the world into that still core. And if you wish, you can open your eyes and you'll find that you can feel the sights of the world in that core. You can feel the colors, the shapes, the textures. And as you feel them, they're coming in contact with your being. They are awakening your sensitivity. What does it mean to just receive the world into the stillness of your core? Fully at rest in the body, fully at rest in the present. And allow that to come to a natural resolution for you and find your way back to your seat. So, it's a matter of acquiring choice that hasn't been granted to us by our culture. Our culture ignores the body's energy by and large. And so you have no choice over it, but to notice it and to notice when it's like this and realize you can allow it to settle. You can feel it and allow it to settle and rest on the earth. And our culture keeps our center of awareness up here in continuous motion. You cannot rest in the head. And to be aware that the center of your awareness can drop down through the body and come to rest on the ground of your being and acquire a relationship with wholeness that requires no divisions. It knows through the language of sensation rather than through verbs. I wish we could play all afternoon, but we're nearly at the end. There are a couple of things I'd like to say. One is, I've got a website. If you're interested in more, it's philipshepard.com. There are audio exercises on it that there are 8 of them. You can buy them for $12 and have them for life, and each one of them is bringing you back to the intelligence of the body. And I also teach workshops and teachers trainings. There's a workshop and a teachers training coming up in Ohio in September, and bopping around, going to Australia and New Zealand in March, and Ireland. If anyone's from Ireland, there's a workshop and a teacher's training in Ireland as well in October, I think. Anyway, that's all there. I just thought I'd let you know about that. Do we have time for one more question, if there is such a thing? One. Maybe two. Crystal at the back. Put her hand up really quickly. Can you toss it to Crystal? Belinda.
Yeah.
Crystal stuck her hand up at just in the back in the center.
All right.
A bouncing microphone.
Thank you for recognizing me. I have, all of my life, suffered from a locked hips as white people have, like in your example. Because culturally, my mother and father wanted us to follow the path of white being right. I'm 80 years old. That kind of puts it in context. And your exercise today tired me out trying to unlock the black hips that wouldn't unlock. But that's not what I wanted to ask you. In my study of humanity, I have found that Africans were caught behind the ice age, behind the ice, and damaged their, I think it's pineal gland. I think it's pineal, right? Okay. And I'm wondering how that connects to your story of putting the top on the water bottle and this whole perspective of the separation between the two brains, the two minds. Would you say something about that for me?
Yeah.
Or did I ask the question clearly?
Well, you asked it enough to give me a go at it.
Okay.
In the evolution of our consciousness, we began here, and then, so we've got the female, and then we rised up into the head and brought that to life with abstractions. And I think where we need to go next is recognizing our intelligence as an axis that runs through the body, just like that corridor, that brings those two into continuous relationship. Because each of them has strengths, and they come into their strengths by virtue of that relationship. So, I don't know enough about the pineal gland and all that, but I do know that different cultures are in different places, but they all tend to be at a certain place in the body. And I think what's needed is to open this axis so that it's like a bar magnet with a north and a south, and it holds this field around it that is just intimately attuned to the present.
And so what difference do you think this will make in our American culture today, given what we're dealing with today?
I think the most dangerous people on the planet are those who feel their ideas about reality more keenly than they feel reality. We marry ourselves to ideas and obscure the pulse of the present. and to be with another person and feel them. I mean, stereotypes are a great time saver. But my goodness, you see someone, you sort of already know who they are because of that desire of the brain and the head to categorize and typify. And felt relationship is such a different realm. And when you're in felt relationship, you're not chasing an idea of success that is divorced from wholeness. And you're called, the world calls you to nurture where there's vulnerability, to support where support is needed. And as long as we are living by ideas and holding on to ideas about the way things are, incapable of opening the body's intelligence to what is here before us, we'll never turn that corner.
You opened a difficult area for us to consider when you talked about the sexual energy, the genitals. And so, following suit, I'm going to ask you to take that thought that you just shared on a political base, because I've had difficulty in feeling wholeness since the last presidential election. Can you help me with that?
What we face in wholeness, we cannot deny, but nothing can keep us from establishing the alternative for ourselves. So the narcissism and the division that can show up in a political arena can show up in us. And to come in, to take on that, the joy and the courage necessary to come back to our wholeness is to forge an alternative and to model it. And that will move us forward.
I'm convinced that you are real. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's
Thank you.
just been such a joy being with you all here. Thank you for all of the heart that you brought to these past few hours.
Thanks so much, Philip.